We're getting new information about the Uvalde shooting, which took place, was it this month? A few weeks ago? In Uvalde, Texas. I think it was called Robb Elementary School. And this is very uncommon for a shooting, for us to get follow-ups and like actual information that's that's going to make the news, because we didn't get anything like that after Sandy Hook or after the Vegas shooting or a lot of these other shootings. We just don't learn anything about them. It's kind of, you get the breaking news and then that's it. But in this case, it seems like the state of Texas plans on holding the Uvalde Police Department accountable for their negligence, which appears to have directly led to the deaths of these 19 children and I believe 2 teachers. The head, I don't know what his exact title is, the chief or whatever, the director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, who himself is an ex-Fed, I believe. A guy by the name of McGraw. I believe he was an FBI guy and is now the head, the top law enforcement officer in the state of Texas. His department has analyzed the performance of the Uvalde Police Department, and their commander on the scene, I believe his name was something like Aradeno or something, I can't remember now. It's like A-R-R-A-D-E-N-D-O, maybe? I can't remember now. I'd have to see it again to pronounce it. But anyway, it's this guy who was the chief of the Uvalde Police Department, or maybe he was the chief of the school district's police department, because some school districts have their own police department, which operates independently of the county sheriff or of the local municipal police department. But either way, this guy's agreed, or at least it's allegedly agreed, that this guy was the commanding officer on the scene. Now, he denies it, which is interesting. He says, I had no idea I was the commander on the scene. And so it seems like they could be trying to use this guy as a fall guy and say, oh, well, it's all because of his orders and he wasn't really in charge that day. You don't know. I mean, because this is a pretty complicated cover-up so far. Because that guy is denying it. But so far, everybody else seems to be dogpiling on him and saying, oh no, he was the one who gave us our orders. So it's a he said, she said thing at this point. That guy, who is now a city councilman, is pleading his innocence. But everybody else is saying, hey, you were the guy in charge, which would make sense. It would make sense that the guy who's the head of the school district's police department would be in charge of dealing with a mass shooting at a school. And so we're getting screen caps now of surveillance footage from the school. And it showed that at 11:52, there was an officer in the building with a rifle, meaning somebody who was evenly matched with the shooter. Now, even so, I mean, is it impossible for an officer armed with just a pistol to take down a shooter? Is it impossible for an unarmed officer or an unarmed person in general to take down a shooter? No, it's not impossible. And, no matter what, how heavily or lightly a police officer is armed, it's their job to go in and rescue kids from a mass murderer. That's just part of the job. But even if you wanted to give these guys, as much benefit of the doubt as possible and say, okay, they don't want to go charging in there unless they are at least evenly matched with the shooter. Well, we know for a fact that they were by 11:52 and in the building. Yet the shooter was able to continue his rampage for over an hour. And so these cops were walking around the school patrolling, I guess just to make sure that no hero came in to try and stop the guy. And this is where I have an issue with just blaming the commander. If these guys were just following orders and walking around while this guy's killing kids in the classroom, how do you not disobey your orders? Okay, I get it. You had an order from a superior officer, but you're a cop. It's not like you're in the military. You're not going to be executed on the spot for insubordination for saving kids, which arguably in the Middle East during the War on Terror, that is something that would have been a very, very bad thing. Because there were guys in the military who wanted to rescue children who were being abused and were under orders not to do that because the abusers were U.S. allies. But we're not talking about the Middle East. We're not talking about Afghanistan. We're talking about Texas. We're talking about an elementary school with regular American kids, with kids of some of these officers. And these officers were ordered to not save them, and they just followed those orders. And we're supposed to think that they're good guys. We're supposed to think, oh, well, hey, no harm, no foul there. No, in fact, by not intervening, they did cause harm. They caused harm to those 19 kids. Any one of those officers could have disobeyed their orders if they really were under orders from this guy who's now a city councilman to not intervene. They could have charged in there, and they could have taken him down. Or at the very least, they could have died trying. And so the only conclusion, only two conclusions that we could come to is either that these officers wanted this to happen, that they were in cahoots somehow with the shooter, or that they were just cowards. It's as simple as that, because just following orders is no excuse in this kind of a situation. When you have one guy who's in a classroom slaughtering children, your orders don't matter at that point. That's so far, like it's so far removed from the immediate situation. You don't think about orders, just on a human level. Orders are not something you're concerned with in your mind if you're in that moment. If you're in a hallway and in the classroom, on the other side of the wall from where you're standing, children are being killed, you're listening to the gunshots, you're not thinking about your orders. You're thinking about, if I go in there, is he going to kill me next? That's what you're thinking. And so the problem here is that these cops who signed up for a job where they might be asked to risk their own life to protect civilians, they chose not to risk their own life. They chose to prove that they're useless. They chose to let those kids die. And then they wanted to make sure so that nobody would make them look bad, so that nobody else would save them. They made sure to stop any civilian or parent who wanted to go in there and help those kids. They can't blame it all on one guy. They can't just blame it on the leader, because there were a lot of people who made this happen. That one guy, if he wanted those kids to die, if he wanted those kids to sit there defenseless, he would have had no power to do so if everyone else wanted to go in. That's the truth. One coward couldn't have caused this situation, or couldn't have led us to this situation. But one brave person, one courageous person, would have been enough to end it. In fact, according to the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety, within 3 minutes of the shooter entering the building, the police had enough resources in the building themselves to take him down and end the situation. So this crisis, which would have never been a crisis had this occurred, could have been over in 3 minutes. That was the conclusion of the state. And remember, these are other cops. These are state cops analyzing local cops. So these are not anti-cop people. This is not, oh gosh, what's that website? This is not an editorial in the Free Thought Project, okay? This is not some cop watch blogger talking about how this could have been over in 3 minutes. These are other Texas cops saying that these cops in Texas, within 3 minutes, could have ended this situation. That the door was not even locked. That they were waiting on, oh, we have to wait on a key. We don't have a key. We can't go into that classroom. We need the key to the door. We can't break the door down. Oh, the door was never actually even locked. Or rather, they never even tried to open it. the way that the guy from the state said it, he said, oh, first we can't go in because we have to wait for rifles. So they waited for rifles. They got rifles. And they go, oh, well, we have to wait for body armor. Well, body armor. Oh, well, we have to wait for riot shields. Well, they got the riot shields. And all this time, the police were armed. The children were not armed. The police had body armor. The children did not have body armor. And so the decision, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety and their investigation of this, the choice was made to prioritize the safety of these Uvalde police officers above all else, above the lives of the children. Even though, the police, had they charged in, they wouldn't have been, their lives would have not been as threatened as the children's lives were, being trapped in there. The police, they were armed. They were adults. They had body armor. They had shields. They were much better equipped to deal with this guy than the kids were. So they had a much better chance of survival if they went in than any one of those kids. But there was still some risk that they would be harmed or injured in trying to take him down. And that seems to be what all the stalling was about. And so what's the answer to all this? Well, if you ask John Cornyn, the senator from Texas, apparently it's still gun control. We were hearing that, he pulled out of the talks or whatnot. Well, I haven't seen it yet. The guy hasn't come out publicly and repented. He hasn't done any of that. Thankfully, I think that this is the weakest push for gun control after a tragedy yet. And the truth about the tragedy seems to actually be coming out. And it's coming out to such a great extent that I'm almost suspicious of it now, of the information. Like, what angle do they have on this? And I don't mean the Democrats. I just mean whoever's letting this come out, because they never give us information about shootings. We have no idea what happened in Vegas. Just poof. So I'd say that somebody is just trying to, scapegoat this cop and put all the blame on him. But it certainly looks like the cops themselves, some or all of them, are absolutely responsible for what happened. And so you can't really call it scapegoating if it's accurate, if it's deserved, which it appears to be in this case. And, people who work in the state of Texas, it would kind of make sense that maybe they're not super pro-gun control people anyway, so they don't have the same incentive to try and cover up, the real events in order to try and foster, a gun control push. So they have the privilege of being a little more open about what really happened and getting to the bottom of it. So, I don't know how much. I hope we get more details about this. I hope that some people are held accountable. I hope that this becomes a bigger story, because it should be. This tragedy did not need to occur. Remember, the cops were the ones who chased this guy into the building to begin with. They were pursuing the shooter because he had shot somebody else, not at the school. And they chased him into the school. And so their blame extends much deeper than anybody, your average American certainly knows at this point. So I think that spreading awareness about this really wake people up about the nature of the cops. Because what is the fundamental thesis of the gun grabbers, of the gun control folks? It's that ordinary civilians, they shouldn't have these arms. They should be in the hands of police, who know how to use them and who will protect us. Well, given the opportunity, you see what the police did. If those arms were in the hands of parents or community members that cared about children, we know that the outcome would have been very different. We know that this could have been over in 3 minutes. So I will repeat my call from the last time I talked about the Uvalde shooting to disarm the police and arm the citizenry. The police need less arms. The citizens need more arms. I think that the funding, a lot of the funding that goes into these overfunded and underperforming police departments should go into arming willing citizens and training them in how to deal with these situations when the police refuse to. At the very least, we got to hedge our bets, because putting all our chips in with the cops is going to get not only us killed, but our children killed. You know, the police, they buy pretty expensive guns, but you don't need to buy expensive guns just to arm, every American. They could order Tokarevs from China. You used to be able to get those dirt cheap, under $100. I'm sure you could if you placed a bulk order. Now, of course, there's trade restrictions with China. Can't buy Norinco guns. Ooh, they arm terrorists, as if the American military doesn't arm terrorists and American arms companies. But, leaving that aside, hell, even if you don't buy it from China, you can buy them from Pakistan, something like that. Give everybody a little Tokarev pistol. They're real, they're pretty easy shooting, easy to rack, pretty thin, something that people can hold. It's a good general purpose kind of pistol. And again, the main reason I suggest them is that they're dirt cheap. Communist weapons kind of work like that. They tend to be pretty cheap, inexpensive, easy to service. And just set up public ranges where people can go and get basic training, and let them carry guns. And even if they don't want to carry them, let them keep them in their house. Hell, somebody who lives across the street from this school could have run in. Somebody, anybody. But this is something that I think that the state should encourage. With all the resources that we put into these professional police officers, I think diverting a good portion of that into trying to arm the citizenry would be a prudent investment. And trust me, that's a compromise position. That's just me trying to put something forward that's reasonable, that might get picked up, through legislation. I think that, a state like Texas certainly could pull something like that off. Buy in bulk, 500,000 cheap pistols, a bunch of ammo imported, bring it up off a ship, and sell them to willing citizens at that wholesale price, and then offer them, free range use or training or whatnot. Sell them, ammo at wholesale prices, and encourage an armed populace. I think that would be a pretty easy thing for a state to do. And I think that when we get more states who want to be a little more serious about the Second Amendment and about civilian gun ownership and really embracing gun culture and what it's there for, we might see something like that. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.